Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, the co-author on the theory of daily fantasy sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com. Join with me as usual, the host of the high stakes DFS podcast on awesomeo.com, Neil Orfield. I caught up on the past two episodes of yours. It took a while to get to since I was away for a week, and I
Oh yeah.
expected a lot of shit talk from Eric Blindfor, but he actually was said a lot of complimentary things about me.
It really we should have turned it into a roast. I feel like there's a very niche audience that would have loved it if we just roasted you for like an hour, which did not happen at all. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry to the audience who would have loved that. We did disappoint you, and we said only nice things about Blender.
Right. The part of the main conversation is like, well, how do you get a word in on
Right.
on the
Yeah,
podcast?
I figured Eric's an old pro. I mean, leading up to it, I watched a couple of your old episodes with Eric. I don't think I've seen all of them, but at this point, I don't know which of your episodes I've seen and which ones I haven't. So I watched the last one, which was called Life EV, which was interesting. But I could tell like he was a veteran at getting his words in. So I was like, I need to take some lessons from Eric. I figured as long as I was doing the show, and people might also enjoy hearing Eric's perspective there.
Right. You got to barge in. Right. You
Yeah.
got to. Like, I come from
And I
the
know
old.
that at this point. I know that I need to barge in. It's just there are some weeks I show up and I'm like mentally ready to barge in, and there are some weeks that I'm like I'm kind of tired, and you're talking about stuff that's a little bit uh, abstract or difficult to barge in. I don't find an easy point, and I just kind of let it go. And I think that the audience is okay with that too, for the most part. Just hearing you go on about a subject that you have strong feelings about. So, but I'll do my best to barge in when I can.
It makes your job easier, I think.
It does. It makes my job really easy. I can talk as much or as little as I want to, really.
Right. It's very similar on Roto Grinders when, like, there's a small slate, right? It's like me and Dean on Grinders Live early for like some 4 game afternoon slate. It's like, well, how are we going to fill an hour and 10 minutes? It's like, I'm on the show. It doesn't, it,
Yeah.
like, if you don't want to talk, I could talk forever. That's just what I
It's
do.
funny. I've started hosting some shows at Awesomeo, doing some MLB shows, and I've done shows with Terry McBride, and we always go long, and it became kind of an issue where they had to tell us like, okay, you guys need to shorten up and like finish on time, uh, because we got to get the NBA guys going. And he has so much to say about every team. And then I did a stream where I hosted with Adam Scherer, and it was like 8 games, and because I was used to going with Terry, I was like, well, this is going to be no problem filling this up, and I just didn't try to do any kind of small talk, didn't really go to any high level stuff, just like did the game by game thing, because I know with Terry that's like I need to like really speed it up. So I was doing that, and then we finished the last game where there were like 12 minutes left, and I was like, oh shit, like I don't know what to do now. I just took questions from the audience, told a couple anecdotes, but it was like, yeah, this is it was a different experience with different people. And Adam is usually a pretty big talker, but I think it was because he was with me and we don't know each other as well. Like if he's talking with Lawfy or Josh, I think they do a lot of shit talking and shooting the shit, and we just didn't really do that much of that. So yeah, it's definitely something. It's different with different people on the shows.
Right. And you talked a lot about best ball with Eric. Then they had Steve on the Colts.
Yep.
Talking about him and Sean and Alex doing stuff behind the scenes at awesomeo.com, and obviously it's working out for Sean, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, it's working out for Steve too. I think they're both doing pretty damn well, and obviously Alex as well. But yeah, Sean has been just crushing everything this year in MLB,
Yeah, I'm not
from what I
playing much
gather.
MLB. I've been debating. I've been debating this for maybe 3 months on focusing more. Like it's one of those things where do as I say, not as I do. Like if you listen to the course, for instance, like the two biggest things, I guess, in DFS to be profitable is one, the number one by far is find the weakest opponents. So no matter, you don't have to be great, as long as you find people weaker than you, you're gonna profit. But number two, and the kind of the point of having a tool like Roto Tracker, right, and studying your own play is there's so many contests available to you. There's multiple sites, multiple sports, multiple formats that you should allocate your bankroll and your volume to what you have the biggest edge in. Uh,
Hmm.
and do you have to play every slate? Do you have to play if maybe you're good at short slates, so you don't play the main slate. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're not the best at late swap, so you play turbo NBA slates where you don't have to worry about late swap as much. Maybe your edge is in showdown, so you just instead of. I mean, I know some people that are great at NFL showdown that don't even play the main slates on Sundays. They just
Yeah.
I'm going to play all the showdown slates, even if it's only like a 10K prize pool, because they're running like 6 showdowns at the same time at 1 o'clock Eastern, and then they
Yep.
just devote their volume to that. Even
I
though
get that.
the bulk of people are playing, yes, if you're going after the weakest opponents, you're pretty much playing the main slates. But it came down to, like, for instance, the thing that I have to weigh between each other. It is very similar to what happened to me in like 2017 or so. Because I started with just soccer, right? Because that's the sport that I knew. So I
Mhm.
learned most of the DFS concepts by playing soccer DFS, and the soccer lobby isn't big, right? You don't the EPL and Champions League, Premier League and Champions League are decent sized contests for soccer. But then you have these interleague slates, these Friday showdown slates. Then in Saturday afternoons you have the Italian league. You got MLS. Sunday you may have a 2 game slate. And the thing that I was playing all of them, like basically because that's the only sport I was playing. So like any soccer slate there was, that's all I played. And then
Mhm.
during the summer of 2017, like during the summer, soccer gets light, and especially back then where they weren't offering the international, the world teams types, unless it was the Euros, unless it's the World Cup. 2017 didn't have any of that, so there's few and far between soccer slates other than MLS, which are very small contests. Then I'm like, let me play baseball, right? So I'll learn how to play baseball, similar concepts, and I learned how to play baseball. And now
Mhm.
the prize pools in baseball are much bigger than soccer. And then NBA comes around, and I'm like, why don't I play some NBA? Because soccer would only be like maybe 3 or 4 days a week, and then we get these short slates, and a lot of times they'd be afternoon, 2:30 in the afternoon Eastern time. Slate's over at 5 o'clock, and like what else am I doing? So let me learn
Yeah.
how to play NBA. Let me Sundays NFL. Let me learn how to play NFL, and the liquidity in those sports is so big in
Yep.
comparison, and so many more weaker players that's like, should I be devoting my bankroll to these 3 game soccer slates where like the first place in the main GPP is $2,000,
Right.
where the cash action is mostly sharp, right? And I'm like, okay, I'd rather devote my bankroll to the major sports because that's where the money is.
Yep.
But now with all the formats that are out now and amount of contests that they offer, like I'm starting to consider the other side being that, like, why should I be playing tonight's MLB slate? Like what, like, is there, if I were to choose between playing tonight's MLB slate or tomorrow's UEFA League international soccer slate, should I be playing the soccer slate? Should I should
I
I
mean,
be should I be should I be playing the late baseball showdown slate instead of the main slate? Should NFL Sunday, should I be playing the snake drafts? The tiers
maybe.
contests?
I mean, I definitely so I'm a big proponent of flash drafts, which they have in NBA and NFL, and I cleaned up doing that in NFL. I've done that. That's the only thing I've done for the NBA finals is flash drafts, and I have not won, but I can see that the edge is still there because people. So flash drafts. Are you familiar? It's like a
Yep.
multiple choice, and it'll be like choose from one of these three players, and you choose one, and it'll give you a new set of three players, and oftentimes they'll give you a multiplier 1.5x or like 2x on a really bad player, on a bench player, whatever. But then the players will repeat, and I can see that there's clear edge because people will take Jalen Brown over Clay Thompson in one multiple choice, and then two later Clay Thompson will come back up again, and they'll take Clay Thompson over Draymond Green or whatever. So you can find clear advantages by just being consistent internally within your own picks, so that you don't need to find the thin outcomes where it's like Clay Thompson is outscoring Draymond Green, but also being outscored by Jalen Brown, or I don't know. There's a lot of examples, but it's like if you are just internally consistent with your picks, I think that there's clear edge in showdown, and it hasn't worked out for me. But I think that, or not showdown, in flash drafts. But I think that there's enormous edge there. So I think that's an example of just a smaller contest types that people haven't really figured out yet, and you can make a lot of money just by. I think long term, it's a long term winner if you just play intelligently, just use your brain a little bit in being internally consistent. So yeah, but I guess you still want to target contests where you can have a real big payout, right? So that's I don't know,
Well, but
that's tough
that's
for
the
me because
downside. Like this is in my this is the thought process is in my head. It's like I could play MLB or NBA daily. So we're throwing out NFL, right? So
yep.
just like the sports that happen every day when they're in season. And I could play, let's say, for instance, I could play $1,000 to $1,500, $2,000, something like that, in those sports daily, playing primarily the large field contests, playing primarily the main slate, right? Yeah, I may play a 121 entry, I may play three $88 entries, yeah, but for the most part, it's large field contests. Now, what I've been doing is only playing on one site. So it's like, if I'm going to play $2,000 worth of volume, I could do it that I could play it all 2,000 on one site. I could play 1,000 each. What I found in practice, it's hard for me to devote the ample time to play skillfully on multiple sites at the same time. So I choose
Okay.
one or the other depending on the payout structures and stuff like that. So there's room for me to expand. So I could either focus on still playing those types of slates, but playing less volume on more sites. So like the whole point of like diversification. Do I when I play one slate, my goal is to build plus EV lineups, but also I don't want humongous swings where I'm just taking us down. I'm fading the cores game completely in 150 lineups, and if it goes
Hmm.
off, then I'm dead. Like minus 95% easy.
Yep.
So I'll have something in there. Now, diversification methodology could be just in the sports and the formats and everything that you play. So let's say, for instance, I'm not saying that this is the best example of what I would do. Let's say you foregoed playing the main slate in baseball. And let's say it's a normal size, 12 game normal baseball slate. But there's an 8 o'clock 4 game turbo, and there's a 4 game 9:30 night slate or something like that. And then you also
Hmm.
have like a two featured showdown MLBs. Now the contest size of those are smaller. So even if you play the main GPP in those, maybe first place is $2,000 to $5,000. Maybe on the night slate it's a little bit higher, a little bit more top heavy. Maybe the
Hmm.
showdowns. Maybe in showdowns you find that there's more weaker players that are playing like cash games almost. Maybe you could get $200 or $300 on a showdown MLB slate, maybe $200, and you're finding the weakest opponents there. And then you're playing $300 on the turbo slate. Then you're playing $500 on the night slate. Then you're also playing, maybe you're playing the main slate on FanDuel for $4 an entry, and you're building 150 for that. You're getting your 2,000 in volume, but you're diversifying like
Hmm.
by like it's like, dude, like in the turbo slate, on the night slate, there is no cores. So cores doesn't go, it doesn't affect that slate, but on the turbo it is. So maybe on the turbo slate, because it's such a smaller slate, maybe I decide to get leverage by fading cores completely in that slate and
Hmm.
try to like hope that cores fails. But in my 150 set on FanDuel, maybe I do have 15% of cores. Like it's all kind of balanced out. And I'm getting diversification that way
Yep.
rather than just saying I'm just playing the main slate and so be it. Same for NBA or like in soccer, like on an NFL Sunday. Maybe instead of focusing like and putting all my volume in the NFL main slate, I'm like, well, why don't I put 500 on the 9 a.m. soccer slate? Let me look at all these showdown contests and see like there may be a game amongst the showdown contests that has a lot more options to give
Hmm.
me more uniqueness. And I go, let me target that showdown slate, this showdown slate, one of the 4 p.m. showdown slates, play the afternoon slate for $800, but only play the main slate for like 1,500. And yes, there's more work to do, but I'm trying to just find the pockets of edges that instead of just trying to find all the edge in one slate, where I'm
Mhm.
not just reliant on like my Sunday is all based on the main slate. Like if
I think
something
that for your stated goal of making $50,000 to $70,000 a year and minimizing risk, this sounds like a good idea.
right,
Like
it
this sounds like a great way to
intellectually you're
do
right.
exactly what your stated goal is. For if you're trying to make a lot of money, like a lot more, I mean, that is a lot of money, but if you're trying to make significantly more money, obviously you can't do that by finding those micro edges and diversifying like that because you need to be winning the 100K to first contests regularly and you need to be putting a little bit more risk in there. So I think that, yeah, that makes a lot of sense for most players.
Right,
And
because
maybe at this point that's where I need to be moving because my downswing continues this year. But yeah,
right,
I
because
think
that's
that
what I'm bringing up my roto tracker, because that essentially what I was doing the first 3 years of playing DFS, 2.5 years. So if I go to my graph lifetime, like through through my first my first decent size win. Let's see, can I find this? I think in baseball or something like that. I think I got a second place in baseball in May of 2017, I believe. Let
yeah,
me check the date on this. Right? I don't know. It's a weird problem to have. I have too many five-figure wins that it goes off the screen. Uh,
yeah,
but I believe I'm just looking at my graph, like because that would be the turning point of me like playing another sport other than soccer regularly. At that point, before that, I started in October 2015, but my first 6 months were mostly low stakes, like nothing that you could make a significant. You're not making $50,000 to $70,000 a year
yeah.
at that level. But like at the point of May 15th, 2017, before that 20K hit, it looks like, because I was in a second place in baseball. Uh, my total lifetime profit was $53,600, and that was just in soccer. And
Yeah.
the swings in soccer are not big because how much money can you play? Like you can't really go on that huge swings. And then if I continue that to my like first decent, like these are all soccer wins. My first decent, oh yeah, yeah, my NBA first NBA decent score. At that point, playing some baseball and still mostly soccer. Monday, March 5th, 2018, my total lifetime profit was $110,444. So that's about 2.5 years of play, right? And the first half a year could barely even count. So
Hmm.
like playing at a level where you could possibly make that. I mean, that's like $55,000 a year.
Yeah, that's you'll take that.
Of course, it's a different time period. The game's probably a
It is
little
an
bit
easier, yeah.
softer, right?
Yep.
But then, obviously, once I started getting involved in the major sports, NFL, everything like that, I get these humongous spikes, right?
Right.
100K spikes, 50K spikes, and like I probably could never get up to where I am now, over $500,000 uh, without those.
Yeah.
But as you said, if my stated goal is just to make $50,000 to $75,000 a year, like there's a lot more options now than there were back in 2017,
Yeah.
2018. Like Showdown didn't even exist. Like for
Right.
instance, like some of these formats weren't even there. And I find that there may be more edge in those for the risk to lower the risk of ruin to on a course of it. Like for instance, let's just get to NFL. Like I gave that NFL example before. Like instead of putting like $8,000, $10,000 on a main NFL slate, like doing a little bit more work, putting 2,000 on a main NFL slate, putting 1,000 on the afternoon slate, putting
Hmm.
500 bucks each on like 4 showdowns, doing $1,000, maybe 500 to 750 on the Sunday night showdown, Monday night showdown, Thursday night showdown. That all encompasses 1 week. Try to get that $8,000 to $10,000 amongst a lot of that stuff instead of saying, let me identify, like, okay, there's a lot of edge in this main slate NFL. And if I don't realize that edge, I could have a minus 70% day.
Yeah.
It's going to be very hard for me to have a minus 70% day playing 8 to 10
All those different
different
slates.
slates, right?
Yeah.
I probably don't have the upside as much because I'm not playing as many lineups, not playing as much volume, in the main slate NFL or even in the bigger showdowns, Sunday, Monday, Thursday night. But that's what I did before. I mean, I was never really a 150 player to begin with. So
Right.
me, the difference between making on Monday night, instead of making 50 showdown lineups, I'm making 20 showdown lineups. I'm still trying to make 20 plus EV showdown lineups. I'm still building for
Yeah.
uniqueness and like I have no problem if a,
I
if
mean,
a
building
137 way tie wins, I just lose. Like I'm not building for min cashing,
Yeah, I
but
think building plus EV showdown lineups has the biggest risk of ruin, right? Because it's generally building plus EV lineups. You're going to lose way more often than not
right.
in NFL showdown. So the more you enter there, the closer the more your risk of ruin increases.
Right. And then if I want to play like cash games or something, I like play tiers. Like that,
Yeah.
there's weak opponents that you could play in tiers. Like, is it like this? This is more of a psychological question. I think intellectually we both know that that's the smarter answer. But from a
Should take
psychological
that approach.
perspective,
Yeah.
isn't it one of two things? One, easier work wise to focus on one thing. To
Yeah.
just be like, I'm just gonna play the main MLB slate today and I don't have to do different things for different slates. And two, the psychological thing of like, well, the way that I'm going to be playing, like, I'm not going to be in contention for 100K most nights. There's not going to be those as much. Obviously, NFL Showdown, MMA.
Yeah.
Maybe I play some golf showdown. Maybe I mean like I I could expand to other things that I've not really regularly played and just be like, can, maybe this is a better way to put it, Neil. Treat a day the same way that you treat a slate. In a weird way, like it's Monday. It's not
Hmm.
baseball because it's in baseball season. It's just Monday. What is available on Mondays? Is NBA going on to is the play NBA playoffs going on tonight? No. Is it? Yes. Depending on is there soccer going on? Is there a PGA showdown going on? Is there League of Legends? Who knows? I mean, who knows what it is? But then treat the day as well. I'm looking to get $1,000 of volume in play in the best places I can today. And if it just so happens to be all on the main slate MLB, then it just so happens to be that. But I should be going through the lobby going playoff NBA. Is it like it or do I is there a draft version of this? Is that classic versus showdown? I mean, who like a
Yeah.
baseball slate? Should I be playing the night slate?
And one thing that I've been thinking about lately that I have never really tried to do is the Kyle Dvorak approach, and apparently he's still doing it. The chasing the overlay. I've never really gotten into that, and when I was running hot last year, I was like, I don't think it's worth my time to try to do that. Now, of course, I'm having a losing year, and I'm like, maybe I should start trying to actually push some of those edges that are like the obvious edges. Like chasing overlay is one of those that's one of the more obvious edges that I think day to day, look at the lobby 5 minutes before lock, and you can probably find some overlay most places. Am I right that that is still the case? Do you ever look at the lobby leading up to lock and try to find overlay still?
A little bit. I mean, typically like for cash games and stuff like that. Uh, I but obviously that involves a little bit more work. Now
Yeah,
I'm saying this not necessarily because like, well, there's no edge anymore. We got to do something else. It's more of a risk of ruin thing
yeah,
with me. Like and
right,
my goal has always been stated, like not just the result based goal of the $50,000 to $75,000 a year of how do I make the most amount of money for the least amount of work for the least amount of risk. Like
yep,
those three things. So like if those are the levers, right? I always say the levers, the DFS projection, leverage,
yep,
correlation. Maybe that's the leverage of playing DFS as a professional player of the most amount of money. Are you if you pull up that lever most amount of money, you're maxing out the milli maker, right? You're
yep,
playing the highest largest field contests with the top heavy payouts and whatever. You're playing a large percentage of your bankroll, right? Not 20%, but I mean a larger. You're pushing that up. But that risk lever is like way down. I mean, like you're high risk, right? So the lever goes down if it's high risk, right? And then if you up out that risk lever and you go, I'm going to optimize purely based on risk of ruin, you're essentially playing like as many head-to-heads as you could possibly play on every slate you could possibly play. And if you churn out 1.5%, like your risk of going ruin or going broke are very low. Extremely low. Right? But you're not making the most amount of money, right?
Right.
And you're spending a halfway decent amount of time. So now if you want to make the most amount of money with the least amount of time, with the highest risk would be to just play the Millie Maker. Right? That's it. You're not playing a secondary slate. It's like you're just basically, because the least amount of time. You're focused 150 max on a Millie Maker set and you're done. Or you're doing like the single entry highest stake stuff. Right? You're playing one lineup and you're playing in the whatever luxury box above, the $10,000 contest, something like that.
Yeah.
But if you want to do what I'm saying, if you want to like pitter patter everywhere, playing on 3 different sites, like that the amount of work lever, that effective amount of time starts going up, even though the money is in the middle and the risk starts going down. So it's like, where is that balance?
Right.
Of the amount of work that you need to do in order to get that money risk balance in, and it's also all relative to the person. Right? Like to me, soccer, I'm a good DFS soccer player. You don't just go, well, there's edge in the soccer slate, and I know nothing about soccer. Now, unlike Kyle Dvorak, who was like, I'm just going to use all-sum projections and spit out like a lineup as quickly as possible and just rely on the fact that these contests aren't filling.
Yeah.
So it's like skill-wise, not so good, but if the rake is effectively negative, like as long as you have an average lineup, you should be able to profit somewhat. I'm not saying to get to that extreme, but it's starting to get to the point where, like, I think for my goals, that would be better. The other mitigating factor, Neil, is that how do I also do that with content? Because the thing to me is that, like, if I'm going to review an MLB slate, it's going to be hard for me to do that if I didn't play the main slate or I just played a showdown slate. If I yes, the pregame show that I do, I could do anything because it's a strategy-based show.
You can just do fewer lineups, though. I mean, isn't this part of your approach? Is you're just going to be doing fewer lineups in all of your different entries?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I've been doing anyway. Like for MLB tonight that we're playing, I'm playing 4 lineups. Right? I'm playing the 121 and 3 entries into the 88, and I'm done. It's only a 6-game and probably going to be a 5-game slate anyway. On the larger slates, maybe I play on FanDuel. I'm already doing this to some extent by choosing where to play these things, but I've been focused on like I'm the type of person that I'd rather do one thing well than 18 things mediocre. And I've been using that to say, let me focus on a sport, right? So it's like tonight, MLB, right? If there's a soccer slate, don't worry about it. If there's a NBA slate, don't worry about it. Let me just focus on MLB and go all in on that. Maybe I do play the night slate also, but at least I'm focusing on the MLB slate. Maybe I should be thinking more in terms of don't focus on the sport, focus on the where do I put my money, and be like okay, it's a Sunday, right? Because Sunday during NFL season, right? There may be an NBA slate at 6:00. That is a 5-game NBA slate that maybe there's going to be overlay. Maybe people aren't going to be paying attention to that much. Maybe I'm like, maybe I put $500 towards that. And once I'm done with my afternoon DFS lineups for the afternoon slate, I just go over to work on the NBA slate, right? And then maybe there's a baseball, like maybe it's September, right? Maybe there's an 8:00 baseball game on whatever, the Sunday night baseball. And I go, Well, let me build one lineup into that, and then find head-to-heads and find like just optimize that, and maybe I only have $200 into that, and then I have the NFL Showdown, and maybe I have $400 into that, and then just focus on how do I break down my day, rather than how do I focus on a sport. So I could look and go, well, it's Sunday. I'll wake up at 8, do the 9 o'clock 2-game soccer slate. Once that locks, move over to the NFL main slate.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the NFL main slate, get that done. And then at 12 o'clock, there's 2 showdowns at 1 o'clock. Make my, and because I'm not making 150 lineups, maybe I'm only making 5 lineups. Maybe I'm only making 1 lineup. Do that, these 2 showdowns. Once 1 o'clock games lock, now I'm working on 4 o'clock afternoon slate, a 1 showdown slate there, then the 6 p.m. NBA slate. Maybe think more in terms of that. Maybe I don't take on all of that. Maybe I'm like if I'm going to play the 8 o'clock MLB showdown slate and the 6 o'clock NBA slate, maybe I don't wake up early and play the 9 o'clock soccer slate, right? Maybe, or vice versa. Like I kind of like schedule out my time and then focus on that. Like those are the contests that I'm focused on, rather than say everything I'm doing is at 1 o'clock Eastern and then the showdown slate on Sunday. Because sometimes I get burnt out even. I'm just like, I don't even want to play the Sunday 8 o'clock showdown in NFL because I'm just done.
Yep.
Like if there's an edge, if I see on the 8 o'clock showdown that the based on the player pool, there are going to be a lot more unique lineups available than normal. I'm like, okay, let me make sure to play that and not these, and do something. It's a little bit more work, but maybe I can make just as much money, raw money, for what my goal is, and even lower my risk of ruin even more.
But you're increasing your work a lot
by
doing all these different slates.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That could be an approach. I mean, you just said, though, that you like to do one thing well rather than doing multiple things less well. So the more sports you're doing, the more different types of contests you're doing, I think the less work you can put into one individual sport. Not that really, I mean, it's not like I put a ton of work into my MLB. I'm not really spending a lot of time studying the numbers for MLB. It's a pretty simple thing. So I think that it is something you could plausibly do. But theoretically, I think you could, focusing on one sport is probably higher EV overall. Like the Travis Petty approach of like really focusing hard on one sport, I think is probably more plus EV than trying to do bits of every different type of sport and every
it
different
depends
type
on
of
your opponent.
contest.
It depends on the opponents, though. Like that's the main thing about like soccer for me. Like I could focus on like when it comes like back when I was only playing soccer, I was really focused on soccer. But then we get some of these slates now that if I go in the lobby and I go, let me go to the head-to-head lobby, let me go to the double ups, and it's the same. There's no edge there. It's the same people, and I go, yeah, yes, you're right. I know the most about the sport in comparison, but in comparison to other sports, but not in comparison to my opponents.
Right.
Or what? Like in order for me to play a midweek interleague Friday something or other slate with 2 games on it, which is not a great slate to begin with.
So okay, so I think so. I understand your point. If these all the different slates you're playing are the things like the flash drafts or like the more obscure things that the pros don't typically play, then I think what you're saying makes sense. You don't need to really focus on one sport as much. But if you're doing all of the showdowns and playing the afternoon slates and stuff, don't the pros play those more frequently? Like the afternoon, isn't that more pros than the main slate for NFL, for example?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Right. I mean, what I'm saying is that you have to engage in much more work in contest selection.
Yeah. Okay.
Like
so if you're taking the
on
time
the
to
main slate
actually,
in NFL, you don't have to engage in contest selection much. You're playing the largest shit anyway, right?
Yeah.
And then you could always go to the lobby and if you're playing cash games, there's like 180 people listed at head-to-heads. You could post a ton and you'll get picked up by people you've never heard of, type of thing. I'm talking about doing, like, I don't have to do that much work for a main slate because there's so much more liquidity. But for the smaller stuff, like, I'm talking about going in to a turbo NBA slate of 3 games on a random whatever the hell day it is, and go before I even build lineups, before I even decide to play that slate, and go, let me take a look at the head-to-head lobby. Let me take a look at the prize chart. Let me take a look at who's in these double ups, And if I just see like just all the regs, I go, maybe I don't play that slate today. And
Okay.
maybe I check it later at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And maybe I find a 109 head to head against someone I've never seen before. I'll pick it up, set a dummy lineup, and go, okay, I'm playing NBA Turbo Slate, focused on cash games or something like that. But also understand that it's not just finding the edge. It's also the diversifying that edge. I don't mind finding smaller edges, having a smaller ROI if it's spread out amongst eight different slates, right? Because you could do this on Yahoo, you could do this on
Hmm.
FanDuel, Super Draft. I mean, it doesn't even have to be focused on one site, and then
Right.
just decide on days what I'm going to do. Like for instance, on Wednesdays, and this doesn't have to even have to do. This could be around your actual life, like you mentioned before, the life EV. One of the biggest. It's weird to say that over the past year or so, maybe 8 months or so, I've been the least stressful I've been over DFS in general.
Hmm.
Even though I do go on swings or whatever like that, I haven't had like all a heater or anything like that. But like I don't feel the need to play every day. Like I don't feel like it's not like I don't have the fear of missing out. I don't mind doing other things, and it's weird to say, uh, it's all due to professional wrestling.
Just focusing elsewhere. Finding your other hobby has been taking you out of the DFS stress.
Right, but not doing anything. See, the weird thing is, like my wife said, like once COVID hit, I had nothing to do because there was no sports and anything going on. So it's like I haven't watched wrestling in 15 years. Let's see what the hell's going on. And my wife's like once you start watching, you're gonna watch the normal. You're gonna get it. She knows me too well, right? Once you get into a little thing, you're gonna get into everything, right? And of
Yeah.
course that eventually happens. And then she got into it, right? So now
I saw you
she's
guys had a million pictures with
right.
every wrestler at the event.
Right. No, she wants to get right. She's like, I want to get him. I want to get. She's my favorite.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. She's making custom shirts or whatever. She likes it. I follow it more, but she watches it. But that's but to me, that's like our time together.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
So
great.
so it's like Wednesday nights. You know what that means? 8 o'clock at night. It's AW Dynamite, and it's something for me and my like. It's having a life outside of DFS, and I don't feel
Yeah.
compelled to do anything other than enjoy it as a consumer. Right? So it's like I'm
Yeah.
not starting a wrestling podcast. I'm not other than some tweets or something like that because I use Twitter as an entertainment tool. Right? Yeah, I promote some stuff, but for the most part, it's whatever the hell I feel like. Uh,
Yeah.
Like on on a Wednesday night, it's like no, I'm not playing. I'm not playing an MLB slate because it's wrestling, but it's a great slate and I don't feel the need to like if I don't feel
Yeah.
like getting up on Sunday mornings, I'm not playing MLB. I'm not playing the 1 o'clock MLB. Just I'm not doing that. But can I go from one end of the spectrum and be like, well, if I'm not going to play the Sunday 1 o'clock slate, why can't I play the Sunday 4 o'clock? The smaller slate later in the day. Why can't I? The Italian League 2:30. There's a 3-game soccer slate. Not much liquidity there, but why can't I throw 300, 400? But like, why do I have to view DFS in the fact of if there's if there's limited liquidity, that it's not worth playing? That was my previous thing when I got from soccer to the other sports of there's so much more liquidity here. There's so much more money to be made here. There's so
Mhm.
many more weaker opponents here possibly. Why aren't I switching back to the other side of the spectrum of like why don't I just optimize my DFS play to fit around my life more
Yeah.
as a priority
Right.
and then wherever it fits in there's enough action out there and I play most of the sports well enough that I should be able if I wanted to play every day, I could play every day, but it would be on my terms. Maybe I'm just playing an afternoon NFL slate and that's it. Maybe I'm just playing an NBA playoff, NBA like main slate on Thursday and then just skipping Friday. And on Friday,
Yeah.
I'm just going out. Like there's nothing. But
I think it
since
makes
I'm
sense.
going out on Friday, maybe I play the soccer showdown slate Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock or something. And
I've actually been taking more slates off as well. Just this year in general, I've been more frequently like, yeah, if I'm going out, don't really have time to make lineups, I'm just not going to do it. Tonight I might not play. I'm probably going to play some MLB. I haven't decided yet, but it is my dad's 70th birthday today, so we're going out to celebrate. So this might be a night that I just decide not to play because lock is going to be after we get to their house, and I'm not really going to want to be paying attention. So kind of depends on how many lineups we get out and whether I can join later. But yeah, I've been taking off plenty of slates this year, and there's a small part of me that's like, are those the days I would have won? Because I'm on a downswing. I'm like, the irrational thing of like, am I on this downswing because I'm taking off the days that I should have won? I know that doesn't make any sense, but yeah, in general, I think it's a healthier approach to only play when you actually want to play, have time to play, have the ability to play without it interrupting the rest of your life. I think that makes a lot of sense.
but then
Unfortunately, I
optimize.
can't talk wrestling with you.
Right. But then
I've never watched wrestling in my life.
but the second part is optimizing when if you're going to do that, don't play just to play. Play
Yeah,
because it's optimal for the edge for what you're accomplishing edgewise. Like weird to say, become an edge lord, right? Right? You just
yep,
I mean that's obviously not what edge lord means, but I mean you're looking to wake up in the morning like have is it maybe a better maybe would it be more like treating is it more equatable to treating it like it's a job like
yeah,
think in terms of tonight for instance like before I go to sleep tonight I'm going to look at what is available to me to play on Tuesday. What am I doing tomorrow? Okay, I got 11 a.m. show for Roto Grinders. And then I look and I go, okay, I got nothing else for the rest of the day other than that. Maybe I skipped, and I need to edit this for tomorrow, maybe, or I release it on Mondays. It really depends. But I put down whatever I need to do. Maybe I have to go pick up groceries at 1:30, or maybe I have some appointment or something and I just look at that. And the night before, go, okay, let me plan out what's available to me, what slates are available, is there what's in all the sports going on, and then go, okay, I don't know where the edge is going to be in any of this type of stuff, but I know that I have everything kind of planned out. Like there's this available, there's that available, there's a showdown slate for MLB here, there's a soccer thing there, there's a whatever the hell it is. And then just after my show at 11 o'clock in the morning, or maybe before, I do a quick check around the lobbies, right? And go, okay, now that what I know is available, is there anything that stands out? Check the head-to-heads, check the whatever, and go, okay, that looks like I'm going to lean more towards this today, but I don't know. Do the show, and then after the show, go, okay, let me plan out what I'm doing today, right? Okay,
yep,
the 2:30 soccer slate, I'm skipping that. There's really no action there, but the MLB main slate has a special $5 contest on DraftKings for 100K to first. It's like, okay, I'm going to play 150 into that.
yeah,
Right? So that's $750 worth of volume there. And then I go look around and the showdowns. I look around NBA, whatever the hell's going on. And then I say, like, well, if I'm going to play X percent of my bankroll as a max, doesn't mean I have to. I just allocate it that way. And I just go, okay, well, if I'm going to play this late slate, that means I need to be ready from like an hour before this lock, an hour before that lock, and an hour before this lock. And then it's just like, okay, that's my DFS play today. And then after all of that, I go, okay, what's going on Wednesday? What am I doing Wednesday? Okay, well, wrestling's at 8, right? Do I want to play the 7 o'clock MLB slate? Are there too many night games where I'm too concerned that there's going to be some
yeah,
cat lineups aren't out? Maybe I skip that completely. Or maybe there's the NBA playoffs are at 7:30 or something, and it's like, well, I could build those much easier than the MLB lineups because I can just focus on that. Maybe I play 20 lineups into that. Maybe I play 10. Maybe the MLB slate, I don't play 150 lineups, and maybe I'm just gonna play a $121 entry contest, and
hmm,
that's it for that. I'll build my one lineup for that. I don't need that much time for that. 10 minutes before, and just kind of go day by day and break it down and treat every day like instead of
yeah,
contest selection, it's almost like just kind of like bankroll allocation selection. And maybe on
yep,
certain days you're just like, I don't think there's anything worth playing. I'm not playing.
Yeah, I think this sounds like a good reasonable. Is this something you're really considering doing? Breaking up your play in a different way?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be talking through it if I wasn't. It's
All
just
right.
to commit to that. It's so much easier, right? Isn't it so much easier to just go, well, the main MLB slate is tomorrow. Like, I know it's there. I know what contests are available. It doesn't matter to me if there's no teams that are overowned. Like, if everything is efficiently priced and just like, well, what am I going to do? Not play? Like, well,
Right.
that's stupid to think that way. The
Yeah.
right answer is if if you go into a slate and you're like, the pricing is completely efficient and there's no bad players, like
Right.
the correct move,
Yeah.
like war
Don't
games,
play.
is not to play,
Yeah.
right? But then you go into another slate and you go, wow, there's like so much pricing inefficiency, and the ownership is going to be condensing here where it's obviously not right, right? So 30% of the field is going to play Jeff Molina, and I don't know why the fuck they're doing this, but there's so much edge here. Like, who cares about all these other small slates? I want all my volume here because I
Yeah.
identify all these edges, and then I still lose, even with Molina. Like, that 30-20. I mean, yeah, he didn't score enough points, but that
Yeah.
30-27 for Molina, he walked away when he heard it, and then he won. I don't know if you watched MMA.
I didn't watch it, and I
Right.
tweeted about that because I had like 30% of his opponent and only like 13% of. I didn't play a full one. I think I played 45
Yeah,
MMA
I saw
lineups.
you played 45 lineups.
Yeah, so I had very little Molina and had more of his opponent. So I was really cheering for the underdog there, and I tweeted that I didn't watch it, but I was furious because Twitter led me to believe that the other guy, the Zuma whatever, had won.
Zumagulov.
So
He
yeah,
was
Zuma
on the road
Gulov.
to being optimal as a loser because none of the underdogs are winning.
Yeah, but he wouldn't have been anyway, probably, right? Because there
No,
were
no. Well,
enough
once Lucas
mid
Almeida
range.
won, no, once
Yeah.
Almeida won, it knocked him out. But if
Okay.
Trezano would have won, the optimal lineup would have us 40 points Zumagulov, assuming that another underdog didn't score more than 40 points, even in a loss.
Right.
Right. So some
Yeah.
people were like, if Zumagulov, they're showing me lineups with like 568 points with Zumagulov's loss going. The winner, the top lineup is 592. If like I would have won, like no, everyone above you has Zumagulov because that's
Right.
the only way you could make those lineups. So even
Yeah.
if he would have won, you would have still been in 19th place. Like everyone above you has the same fucking lineup. Just
Yeah.
a quick side note on the MMA stuff. I've been running, like I've been mentioning on the show for a while, coming this theory, right? And of course, my simulation methodology is not good. It's flawed, right? Because I'm using proxies to come up with the
Mhm.
points, such as the money line, the inside the distance line, the round one line, as well as a median projection, right? To
Mhm.
account for fight data, right? That type of thing. And I've I'm trying to prove in some fashion that it's possible that lineups that are duped 2, 3, or 4 times, a lot of them have a higher expected value than the ones that are unique but leave like 2,000 on the table.
Yeah. I mean,
Right.
it seems obvious to me that they at least theoretically could be. I mean, not necessarily that they are in
Right.
these contests, but like obviously if you're taking 6 underdogs that each have zero, like very little chance to win, that's not going to be a plus EV lineup. So I
Right.
mean, that's obviously not leaving 2,000 on the table, but it seems obvious to me that probably some of those are plus EV and more plus EV than the lineups leaving 2,000 on the table.
Right, because
But
it just like in NBA, for instance, it's very rare that you leave money on the table because salary is much tied to production,
yeah.
right? Like it's very rare on a take a 9-game NBA slate that the $45,000 lineup. Like you'd rather just spend the money. Like even point per dollar wise, the players don't project as well. You'd rather have the raw points than leave 5,000 on the table, right?
Yeah.
MLB less so, right?
Yeah.
But
You can totally
still,
leave money on the table.
across all of DFS, salary is still related to production in some in a very very high facet.
Yeah.
That's why they're priced more, right? I mean, that's why the players are priced more, assuming that there aren't like massive pricing inefficiencies.
Jesse might disagree with this, but I think you're right.
Right. So like in MMA, I've looked through. Like this is because this is how I started the journey of figuring this out. Because I see like players like Brian Jester that just 150 uniques. Like doesn't matter. Leave 2,500 on the table. Just as long as he's getting uniques, he's fine. But a lot of times he's it's obvious that there are more uniques available the more salary you leave on the table.
Yep.
Right? That's easy to know because most people use most of their salary. But there are uniques or less or more unique lineups that still use a lot of the salary on the table. Right?
Mhm.
So like obviously on let's say a 10 fight card, it's going to be very hard to find 50K lineups that are unique because there's just so few options that even make 50K.
Right.
So on a larger card, there are going to be more uniqueness in 50K lineups that are available to you. Much harder to find because you're going to run into over 20s. You're going to run into lineups that are duped 8, 10, 12 times, something like that. But they are available to you.
Mm-hmm.
So, like on this past slate, I played 150 lineups. And I was trying to optimize for that because it was a 14 fight card. I didn't do as good of a job because I ran out of time because it was a 1 p.m. start time. Like if this was a normal start time, I would have been. I thought 2 hours would be good. 2 hours. Well, I needed like probably another hour. So I kind of ran with my last trim and just ran with it. I ended up with 114 under fives, 44 uniques. Not the end of the world. That's in general decent enough for me. But I could have, if given another hour, I would have had probably 140 plus under fives and maybe somewhere between 55 and 60 uniques or something around there, which is what I was aiming for. But out of my 150 lineups, I had 51 lineups that spent all of its salary that were under 5 duped, 18 of them being unique. I had 22 lineups that spent 49.9 exactly that were under fives. So like 73, about half of my lineups were under fives, 2 to 4, under 4, 1 to 4, and it spent 49.9 and above. Now, a lot of those combinations have low-owned fighters in it in order to get it like that, and if those guys
none of them did well this week,
right? But the fact is, if I ran a simulation, and this is what I've done, is not based on like the lineups that I'm building, but just based on like if I created all these lineups and I ran just based on win probability, round 1 probability inside the distance probability, and you add a little bit of the, fight data variance, right? Guys that win, when they get a little bit more points. When they win, Jeff Molina, right, on a striking based decision ain't scoring 127 points unless UFC stats gives him a million strikes like they did 2 fights ago, right? And the rest, like someone like Evloev, like yes, when he wins he could score 130 points like he did even in a decision. But when I run that, because the salaries are so tied to the money line odds, because that's how DraftKings makes the salaries, a lineup that uses most of its salary or all of the salary will almost always have a higher getting 6 winning fighters into your lineup. More than lineups that leave. The more money you leave on the table, the less likely you will have 6 winners in your lineup. Now, at minimum, outside of the occurrences where no dog wins, you're going to need 6 winners in your lineup, right? So if you go by that, like 50K lineups outperform from a median perspective better than 49.9 lineups, better than 49.8 lineups. It's directly proportional, and it's a deep it becomes a deep slope. Like if you if you ran this, right? Like the difference between a 50K lineup, just to explain it to the audience, you get what I'm talking about. The difference between the winning probability. I'm not talking about winning a GPP probability, but just the chances of scoring 600 points, right? Because I always calculate how the chance of scoring 100 for each fighter. The chance of scoring 600 points for a 50K lineup is not that dramatically higher than a 49.9 lineup. which is not that dramatically higher from a 49-8 lineup. And then it goes to a 49-7 lineup. It's a little bit, not that dramatic, but a little bit more dramatic. And then once you start getting down to 49-6, 49-5, once you get down to like 48-9, now the gap's starting getting bigger, right? Because you're putting more dogs in your lineup.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously it all depends on the distance between the money lines and the fighters. But like 48K lineups, 48-5 lineups have a dramatically different chance of getting 600 points with 6 winning fighters than a 50K lineup. So intuitively, right? Just thinking of those concepts intuitively of uniqueness affects your EV and win probability affects your EV also. Wouldn't it be intuitively correct that a unique lineup at 50,000 is way more valuable than a unique lineup at 48.5?
Yeah, in general, I would say so.
Right. Regardless of the fighters, right? You could say, well, in that 50K lineup, you're playing 2 guys that when they win, they may only score 80 points. It's like, well, that's already factored in the inside the distance, the round 1. I know that, right? But if it's unique and it's 50K, I'm more likely to get 6 out of 6 winners, and the 600 point probability. There may be some 49-7 lineups, 49. There may be some 50K lineups that have a much higher chance of getting 600 plus because of the fighters that are in there, but they're duped 27 times.
Mm-hmm.
So that distance between the likelihood of 600 points is destroyed by it being duped 27 times versus being unique, even though you're relying on like 2 fighters in your lineup that have never gotten to finish in their UFC career, right? In 8 fights or something like that. Like they're inside the distance lines are like plus 350 as a $9,000 fighter, like that type of fighter. But based on the data that I've looked at and simulated in that flawed methodology, like in a perfect world of building 150 lineups, I'd rather have 100, if given the utopian choice, I want 150 unique lineups that use the most amount of salary possible.
Yep.
Yeah. The problem is that it's hard to find those, right?
Yep.
It's easier to find the ones that are lower. And theoretically, if I were to play 150 lineups that use 50K in salary, and someone else uses 150 lineups that use 48.5 in salary on average, and we both have unique lineups, I should have a higher ROI than that set of lineups.
I would think so.
Wouldn't that be? It makes sense. I can't prove it.
I mean, yeah, and it's hard. Well, so I have not really studied Brian's lineups too much, but it's not my impression that he's generally leaving an average of 2,000 on the table.
No,
right?
he's generous. No, he leaves us like 1,500.
Does he really?
Like,
Okay.
like I could look right now at the last contest yesterday.
Well, and as Brian said on my show, he doesn't do well in the Sims. So a lot of other people trying to do the same thing that you're doing.
Right.
He doesn't. His lineups don't grade out that well. They grade out as being negative EV.
Right.
But then he's clearly winning a lot of money. So it's
to make, right. Like it's that I'm viewing it the same exact way. It's just but the difference is that I'm not viewing his set versus in a vacuum. I'm versus his set versus another set that could exist.
Right.
Right. So like if you told me, for instance, that Brian built 150 lineups that are average 48.5 that are all unique, and you couldn't possibly build any lineups that are unique at 50K or at 49, like then his lineup set becomes better because uniqueness matters so much.
Yeah.
But I'm comparing it to how many unique lineups are there at 50K? How many unique lineups end up being at 49.9K? If you were to play 150 of those, would they be better than ones that have 49.7, 49.6, 40, that type of thing? So if I'm going to the, let's see, user unique percentages. Yeah, Brian had 150, 129 uniques, 150 under fives. His average salary was 49.2.
Okay, so that's only 800 on the table.
Similar is 48.8. So if I just looked at, let me look at user court gestures. Court. Right? Yeah, his most duplicated lineup was duplicated 4 times. 4, 4, 4, 4, 3, 2. So if I just go down to the uniques, just the ones, like 48 6, 49 2, 49 2, 48 6, 49 2, 49 3, 48 5, 49 5, 49 6, 49,000. I don't know if I could look to see how many he has of each salary range in this. I don't think I can. But if I just scroll through, like I don't see 49. I see a 49-7 lineup. 40. I don't see. I mean, I'm already scrolling through a whole bunch, and I see nothing at 50,000. Right.
Yeah, I mean, he probably just leaves money on the table.
49-7.
So one thing that Brian said on my show that the Sims he said that the Sims grade out his lineups as being negative EV, and he thinks that there are a couple of things that they're missing that they don't account for that his lineups capture, and he did not say what they were. Do you have any speculation about what he thinks
No, no.
the Sims might
I
be?
pretty much. I think I know exactly what he means. It's just it's uh you're not going by median projection by going through like how much does someone score when they do win versus just winning. So
Right.
the styles of the fighters matter so much more, and that's not captured in median projections.
Sure.
That's not even captured in the floor and ceiling projections on most sites either. Like it's
Okay.
dramatically. There are fighters that have dramatically higher standard deviations than what you'd think. But
Really.
But the thing is that even though I'm using one of his metrics as a proxy.
Yeah.
So like I'm doing my Sims, which are still like I said, flawed methodology. Right? It's not perfect. It's close enough, but I think, but it's not perfect. I'm using that. I'm
Okay.
using that when this underdog does win, they score more than some of these 9K fighters.
Hmm.
So having that guy and leaving 1,500 on the table becomes a much more viable lineup because when they do win, it's just that they win 27% of the time while this other
Yeah.
guy wins 74% of the time. And even though 74% of the time their average score is an 85 or a 90, and when this guy wins 34% of the time, their average score is a 95 or 100, even accounting for that, the lineups that use most of their salary are the ones that if you took away unique if you treated every lineup as it being unique, the lineups that are higher salary are win more often. If
Yeah.
if you removed uniqueness altogether. So if that's the case, if you removed uniqueness altogether and a 50 and on average a 50 because obviously there may be some 49-6 lineups that are better depending on the slate, right? But the that graph still remains the same with that big dip, that kind of slope down. Still,
Hmm.
again, even if you took away uniqueness, once you add uniqueness, that slope starts getting a little bit more even, but it's
Yeah.
still dramatic enough that if I could find unique lineups that use most of the salary, that's set based on what I'm going through, like will win more often. So
Hmm.
if I could make uniqueness a constant, why wouldn't I want to find as many? If you gave me the choice of just like I'm going to give you 150 lineups that are all unique and they're 50K spent, why wouldn't I want that lineup set over one where it's like here's a hodgepodge of stuff?
Yeah. Now I want to talk to Nerdy Tenor again because I was going to say I'd be curious to see what his lineups look like if he's finding a lot of those
Is
because
he
I would
playing
think
MMA? Is he even playing MMA?
I don't I think that he at one point I think last year when he did your show when he was on this show I think he teased that MMA was a sport that he wanted to tackle but I don't think he has been and I was just thinking about that
No,
like
no, he was in the cut. Nope, nope, he's in.
okay
150 lineups, 122 under fives, 53 uniques. Average salary 49.6. Very sim. These are very similar percentage types to me. And
yeah
if I take a look at his, let's see, user entry investigation. Let me get here. Come on, nerdy. Right, yeah, he has some like me 25, 19, 16, 16. But if I take a look at all the way at the bottom, right, at his uniques, right? Here's a 50. He has one at 45.7. Yeah, that's that's not gonna. Yeah, he has Menefield and 6 underdogs. Yeah, that's probably not a good one. And yeah, it's unique, but you're leaving 4,300 on the table. But he has some 48 eights. Let's see, 49 fives. I mean, obviously he's not setting some type of cap. He's doing like
Yeah.
so salary
I
doesn't
mean,
matter. But he
it's
has
just what
some
his
five
Sims give him. I'm just,
50,000,
I'm,
50,000, 49.9. So yeah, he has a lot of 49 sevens, 49 six. He has a mix of everything. He has
yeah.
some that are leave 2,000 on the table, but he also has a bunch that have 49 7 plus
Yeah.
50,000 in
So
here as
I'm
well.
curious because so just based on his methodology, the sims that he ran, my understanding of it is, his lineups compete against each other until they figure out which ones win the most frequently. But then there's no accounting for uniqueness in that process, the way that I understand it. There's no like.
No, I would
So I'm
assume that
curious.
he has to have
I mean, he
some,
clearly
yes.
does. Yeah, he
Right.
definitely does. Because I know I remember him looking through his NFL Showdown lineups. He had one that used all the salary essentially and was unique. And I looked at it, it was because he had Equinemius St. Brown in there, and who was a $200 wide receiver on the Packers who like never saw the field, but he could have seen the field. So I know that he does have uniqueness in there. I'm just it's something that I don't think we talked about when he was discussing his methodology for figuring out his lineups. But I'd be curious to see how he chooses, like maybe he uses the same methodology and then just chooses the ones that win the most money when they win from the wins that are plus EV, just in from a standpoint of winning most frequently.
Maybe. But I'm saying,
I don't
but
know.
I mean, it must mean something. I mean, I'm saying this. I don't know, maybe it doesn't. That it seems like he is optimizing more for under fives, or
Hmm.
at least the way that he's coming up with lineups results in more under fives than in uniques, as opposed to a lot of players that I take a look at user unique percentage, and I see like Cecine, Court Jesters, Giant Squid, N Van Hare, Need Lunch Money, Dalladino, Hog Lawrence, like it's all Jay Z Rucker, Mr. Good Seats, The Mish, Sean Zan, right? But like Mr. Good Seats, for instance, average salary 49.7, and he has 143 under fives and 83 uniques, right? But you
Seems
see,
about
like
right.
at the
Seems
top,
really
like
good.
Court Jester's 129 uniques, Giant Squid 129, Cecine 132, and Van Here 100. Their average salaries are much lower.
Yeah. Hmm.
I
I
don't know
yeah.
if anyone wants to I don't know that I talk about these things because I want people to reach out. I mean, like you talked about with Eric. It's like, yeah, I come across as like this is how it is and whatever. It's not. I listen more than
Yeah.
people think. Like, yeah, on the show I don't listen that
Right.
much, right? I talk a lot,
Yeah.
but outside of the show I'm
You're
listening
leading
to
the show.
everything, right?
Yeah.
I like what is Brian saying? What is Nerdy Tedder saying? What are you talking?
I
What
mean,
is
yeah.
Steve talking about in your show?
It's all
And going,
interesting.
that's
Yeah.
interesting. Let me take a look at some of this.
Yeah.
And some of it I go, I think there's a flaw here and there, but some of it like, well,
Something to be learned. Yeah.
there's something that makes some amount of sense here that maybe I can't do it the same way that they're doing it, but maybe I could find a way to get there similarly. Uh, and it just seemed from studying this MMA stuff that there has to be about like if you take it at its extreme, there has to be a balance, and this is for NFL Showdown as well, because we talk about in the regular slates projection versus ownership,
Hmm.
right? There's some balance of like, well, why don't I just play the lowest owned lineup? Well, because it projects 110 points lower than anything else. Like
Right.
it's not going to happen often enough. Yeah, why don't you play 8 bench players in MLB? Yeah, they'll be the lowest owned lineup, but when the hell does that
Yeah.
ever win, right?
Right.
Or it doesn't win. It wins once every 3 billion years. It's like, which means you lose money because you're not ever. You win once when that happens, right? And it doesn't make up for everything. So if that's the case, when we think about main slates, just because we're adding this uniqueness factor to it, there has to be some extreme example of there that because we see it in Showdown, Neil.
Yeah.
You can build a unique lineup using all the $200 players.
Right.
And it comes up as a unique lineup. You could build 150 of them, but you're like you're throwing your money away by
Are
doing
you
so.
using exaggerated teaching mechanisms right now? Is that what
Yes,
you called them?
yes,
That was the title of the last show, right?
right.
Yep.
So there's an extreme to one end. using all the $200 players in NFL Showdown. There's also extreme other end of like using the 6 highest owned players and one in captain that uses 49.5 plus. That's like, yes, that is the highest projected lineup. That is the most likely to be the winning lineup. It's also
Yep.
duplicated 4,300 times. That
Yep.
it's negative. It's almost as negative EV as playing the one with all $200 players. So
Right.
there has to be a middle ground. So the middle ground can't just be building 150 uniques for MMA, and it can't just be building the 150 top projected lineups that are duped 20 times plus. So where is that? There has to be a middle.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
it's
not
clearly
one or
different
the
for
other.
MMA than NFL Showdown. I mean, I told you. I mean, we talked about this when I started playing MMA because I had a very successful NFL Showdown season this past year, and I left a good amount of money on the table because I found just looking through it, the lineups weren't that much less likely to win. When you could leave a good amount of money on the table, they weren't that much less likely to win in NFL Showdown just because for some of those players, especially particularly like receivers, sometimes the running backs, there wasn't as strong of a correlation between salary and likelihood of hitting a ceiling or hitting an optimal lineup than there is. But then after I talked with you, so I started by applying that to MMA. I was like, okay, I'm just going to leave money on the table. Same approach to NFL Showdown. It seems like it's the same thing. There's a lot of randomness here, and you want to be unique. But then you kind of convinced me to come back from that in MMA, that it is more correlative, the salaries to the likelihood of success
Yeah,
in
but it's the
MMA,
same in
which
NFL
seems to be the
Showdown.
case.
So like Neil, what I think that the two different that we're confusing two different things. Uh, in NFL Showdown, if in DFS in general, assuming some relative amount of efficiency, the salaries do equate to production, even if it's
Yes,
marginal, right? So,
sure.
like having a lineup that has the $6,800 wide receiver in it versus the $5,200 wide receiver in it, the $6,800 wide receiver typically maybe he has a 1 point higher median projection, right? 1 point higher range of outcome type of thing. Uh,
Yep.
Now, let's say you have a lineup that spends a 50K total with that $6,800 player versus a lineup that is the same exact lineup but leaves $1,600 on the table and uses the $5,200 player. The projection difference is a point.
Right.
But the first one may be duplicated 18 times, and the second one may be duplicated 3 times. So the
Hmm.
1 point in projection is not worth being duped 6x
Right.
by playing them, right? But if I were to tell you that you had a choice between those two lineups, and the first one would be duped 3 times and the second one would be duped 3 times,
Yeah.
mathematically,
Take.
which is the better lineup? The better lineup is
Yeah.
the 50K lineup
Right.
because if you just even out the uniqueness, the 1 point higher projected lineup is going to, it may take you a large sample size, going to outperform the other lineup slightly more.
Yeah, but I think so. My impression is that your likelihood of winning goes down much quicker in MMA. That drop off happens a lot at a much higher salary point in MMA than NFL Showdown. At least in my experience, you can leave a lot of money on the table in NFL Showdown and still have a pretty high likelihood of success.
Right.
Whereas in MMA, that drop off comes much quicker.
Right, based on what I've seen in that. But
Yeah,
it still comes down to the that that fourth lever. Essentially, we're adding another lever to DFS by putting that uniqueness lever there. So let's use
mhm,
that example that I did with the wide receiver, 6,800 and 5,200. If one was duped 18 times and one was duped 3 times, you'll leave the 1,600 at table and use the one that's duped 3 times. If they were
yep,
both duped 3 times, you'd use the higher one. But let's say the first one is duped 4 times and the second one is duped 3 times. Like
right,
which one? I suspect that the one extra dupe isn't worth the 1 point in projection. You'd rather play the lineup that leaves money on the table, right?
yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's much closer
Right.
for
It's
sure.
much right. I'm
Yeah,
just trying to scale this up and down. But let's say, for instance, the first lineup was duped 26 times and the second lineup was duped 25 times. Now, for the amount of dupes that are already exist for those two lineups, the
Right.
1 point in projection, you might as well play the lineup that's duped 26. They're probably both negative EV, right?
Yeah.
But if you had how much EV, more negative EV is probably playing the one that's duped 25 times that is 1 point less projected, right?
Right.
Like these are the scales that you're looking, that you're viewing the lineups behind. So
Yep.
when people are like, they focus so much on this one lever or the other lever, when it's a mix of all these levers, and from a pragmatic standpoint, you will find more unique lineups the lower that you go down in salary. So
Yep.
if you weren't adept in finding uniques that use more of their salary, you would be better off by saying, let me just cut this off at 49.5. Let me just try to find lineups between 48.5 and 49.5. Make sure to not use 3 high-owned fighters in the same lineup. Go max 2, right?
Now you're describing my process.
Right, well,
Like,
that's what I'm
I
saying.
decide to play 30 minutes before the slate, and I don't have that much time. I'm like, yeah,
Right.
this is what I'm doing.
Right.
Yep.
So the blunt method of like,
Yep.
where am I? We have all these buckets of marbles, right? There's a lot of marbles here. There's a lot, like, where are we have all these marbles of salary ranges. And you go, well, in the 50K marble bucket, there's 300 marbles, right? That out of 10,000 that are, there's 10,000 red marbles and 300 of them are blue. The 49.9, there's 10,000 marbles and 350 of them are blue. Then we get down to the 49,000s and it's 10,000 marbles and 9,000 of them are blue, right? It's like, well, if I'm prioritizing making sure I get blue marbles, like, and I need to pick 150 of them, why don't I grab the 49,000? Like if I just take out my hand and grab into the 50,000, it's quite possible. If I'm taking 20 marbles, I may only get 2 blue marbles out of that, right? I'm not sorting through and seeing. I'm just grabbing like that, and I'm grabbing like this. So, with the amount of edge there already is in MMA, you could still be profitable by just going, I don't even have to optimize by any type of win probability or anything, that there are still too many duped lineups in these contests that just finding 150 uniques simulated over the course of your lifetime makes you profitable. That you don't have to, whether or not they're 48.5s or 49.9s or what salary in, that difference, that slope on that graph just doesn't matter enough because there's still way too many dupes. People are still playing lineups that are duped. Like I could look here on this past slate, the most duplicated lineups: 175, 63, 52. This is a 14 game slate, 14 fight slate, right? So 51, 47, 46. I mean, you could go down. I've already gone down. There are 60 lineups that were duped 25 or more times.
Jeez.
Right? So if they're duped on average, like let's say 30 times, 30, 35 times, 60 times 35 is
210?
like what? 60 times
210.
Yeah, 2,100 lineups that are duped that much. And if we go to like just let me go to, how am I going to find this? Just lineups that are duped 10 or more times. Right? So 10 or more times. I'm just scroll. Okay, let's get to, what page am I on? 43. Like 42 times. There's 420 lineups about. Right? That are duped at least 10 times. Right? So on average, let's just say it's 15. Right? To count, because there's a lot more 10s and 11s. So 420 times 15 is 6,300 lineups that are, if you were just to rawly say, we're just like, these are negative EV lineups, right?
Yeah.
6,300 lineups out of 31,000, right? There's like 6,300, 31,000. That's a little over 20% of the contest. If I would have told you in DFS that there's more than 20% of the lineups that are just dead to profitability, that's past the rake.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like, wouldn't you want to be playing those contests?
Sure.
And because of all of that duplication, the set that Brian's playing, leaving more salary on the table than I am, getting more uniques, but I'm getting more under fives. Maybe the EV of his set, maybe his EV and my EV maybe are exactly the same
Could
through
be.
two different methods of doing so.
Yep.
I'm just focused on can I that those 300 marbles in the 10,000. I'm trying to find 150 of those,
Yeah.
right? I'm trying and I'm going to miss a lot of times. Sometimes I'm going to get a lineup that's duped 24 times. I'm going to get a lineup that's duped 13 times in the process of doing that. Well, his process, he never gets like he's almost always going to get 140 plus uniques, and because of the amount of duplication that that may be the reason, simulation wise, why his lineups don't show plus ROI. Because, I mean, are they simulating the contests? I just
I assume
there
so.
has to be a read like that. I'm racking my brain on that. I can't I can't accept the fact that other people's simulations has Brian being a negative EV player while he's playing 150 uniques, and it seems so intuitively obvious why he should be plus EV. Why is he play like if you just ran a simulation based on uniqueness, he would win too often and win solo.
Yeah.
That he'd make up for the fact that a lot of times his lineups just don't have enough win probability from a six fighter perspective to get there. But he wins often enough 100K solo. I can't like why isn't a sim covering that? Because I'm using one of his proxies.
Yeah.
It's his Occupy Fantasy Index.
Mhm.
That is dramatically different than a median projection. And I'm using that. And that slope on that graph definitely starts coming much more even. There's still a hump in the beginning. There's still I still admit that I finding uniques that are higher salary are much more valuable. But
Yep.
his lineups come up significantly when you do it that way. And yes, if you took out his Occupy Fantasy Index and he just went by median projection, his lineups would rate out as poor. So like to me,
Sure.
if I'm running because I ran it based on just the betting lines, and his lineups rate out poor. So I'm like, let me add the median projection to this to give some weight to fight data. He still rates out. It's a little bit better, but it rates out as
Mhm.
poor. But once I put the Occupy Fantasy Index on it, his lineups start coming way up. But are still as a set. If I were to choose 150 unique lineups that spend 49.9 plus or 50K, they would be better than his set.
Huh. Interesting. So now I'm curious about maybe it's his qualitative analysis. He did a whole he talked a lot about qualitative versus quantitative analysis, and I would assume his qualitative analysis goes into that Occupy Fantasy Index.
It should. I mean, I've been testing that as a proxy, and it's the best proxy I've found to fight data. Like I've racked my brain after doing just with betting lines and seeing how flawed it is when I'm obviously getting more KO knockout artists and not wrestlers, and that's odd. That's intuitively wrong. It's like, well, just any slate that Marab is on, I'm barely going to have him because his inside the distance is plus 400, but is going to score 168 points in 3 rounds anyway. Like,
Hmm.
there has to be some weight to that type of stuff. And I
Yeah.
tried to do it with median projection. It's just not weighted enough. It's just that it's too normally distributed, and these fighters are nowhere close to normal distributions. So
Mhm.
it's like, how I'm going through all the fight data. There's so much noise, small sample sizes. Like, this can't be trustworthy. And then I ran the Occupy Fantasy Index, and to pass slates and whatever, and that was way more correlative than any of the other fight data. So it's like I found my proxy. I found my
Nice.
like if this guy wins, how much they score type of thing that weighs into all of it. So that's what I'm using. That's what I'm using to simulate. That's what I was using to simulate that stuff. But I
You're
still
doing
get
some
that
great advertising for a website that neither of us work for.
right. Well, for MMA, it's because it's a metric that only Brian has.
Yeah.
Dude, Brian was on the dude. I interviewed Brian on the show and
I know.
literally said, I mean, I
Yeah.
said this. Uh, is that the be all end all? No, it's just like it's something there that takes into account all this type of stuff. And when I throw
Yeah.
it in, it's the only thing that when I throw in makes Brian's lineups plus EV.
It's interesting though. So you say they're plus EV, but they're still not as plus EV as they would be just using his metrics, but spending more of the salary. And
Right.
that's
That
so I'm curious why
essentially that's
he's
the argument that we're talking about. We're not talking about
yeah.
whether or not he's profitable, whether or not it's one versus it's the hypothesis I'm trying to prove here is that all things being equal, would you rather have on average would you rather have a 50K lineup that's unique versus a 49.9K lineup that's unique versus a 49.8 lineup that's unique? That's like down the spectrum. Now, obviously, the fighters are different. That's why we say on average. A 50K lineup where you're using the $9,100 fighter. Let's say you're using a $9,100 fighter in a 50K lineup that's unique, but the $9,100 fighter is plus 350 inside the distance and has a poor, like when he wins a lot, but wins with 80 points a lot. But the $9,000 fighter underneath him, leaving an extra 100 on the table, is like plus 105 inside the distance. And when he wins, scores 105, 110 points. And that 49.9 lineup is unique also. Like that 49.9 lineup is actually better than the 50K lineup. But like on average, you can't go, that's on maybe on a specific slate, but think in terms of 100 slates. Just like on average, the higher price fighters are going to have higher inside the distance lines, higher ceilings in general, and they're going to win more frequently in general. That just as a general concept, like it to me, the hypothesis makes sense that you'd much rather, given the choice, have the higher salary lineup that's unique versus the now scaling that. The next step is: would you rather have the higher salaried lineup that's only duped twice versus the 48.5 lineup that duped once? Now we're getting into that balance of like what's
Now we have to factor in that Brian Jester in particular hates dupes, gets furious when he sees people with duplicated lineups. So I think he prefers the slightly lower chance of winning, but or maybe much lower chance of winning, but unique.
But I'm not saying that that's not
I'm joking,
possible.
but he
The point I'm making is that it's very similar to any other sport we play. Yeah, like when I do the pregame show, and people will show me. It's like, can you take a look at my 20 max lineups from yesterday? Can you tell me if they were plus EV? And I played this slate, and I looked through their lineups and said, they look pretty good to me, right? It's like you just obviously this team didn't score well, but they were underowned. Like I looked through them, I go, these are fine lineups, and it's like. Yeah, and they're like, well, my lineups don't look anything like your lineups. It's like, do you know how many possible plus EV lineups there are? Right? In a 12-game MLB slate? I mean, like, it's ridiculous.
There's
so
a
it's
lot.
like there's no, like, all you have to make sure is, like, don't play the highest owned lineups and don't play the lowest projected lineups and correlate. And you're going to find tons upon tons of lineups in MLB, and the amount of variance there is in MLB, the differences between 50,000 lineups could be nothing. Like, like as long as you're not making mistakes, you have competitive lineups that are probably plus EV. So, like from a Brian's perspective, is that the state of MMA contests the way they are, him just focusing on that uniqueness is profitable. Right, and I can't see how it's not profitable, but let's just, for instance, well, like he's mentioned on your show, like what if people find this stuff out, right? More,
Right.
And let's say we add, for example, 50 more 150 maxers into this, so that now we're adding another 7,500 lineups, and they're all building lineups that are 49K on average, like down there. And next thing you know, Brian's looking at lineups that, like, out of his 150 lineups, 109 uniques, right? He's still fun because there's still tons that other people have. And all these people are playing, lineups that are 49.3, 48.8, 40, like all these types of things because they're leaving salary on the table. Well, at that point, isn't it more profitable to find the ones that are at 50K? Right? Because now you're going to that jar of marbles that normally had 9,000 blue marbles inside of the 10,000 marbles, and now there's only
Right.
5,000 marbles. Like now, but the 50,000 bucket that has 10,000 red marbles still has the 300 blue marbles. It just turns
Right.
out that all these people are hovering around the 49K lineups, and like I'm just sitting over there going, I'm plucking out these over here. Like, I don't know, someone email me, but Jordan at theoryofdfs.com or tweet me. Like it seems to me someone must have data or some I don't know. I've looked at this. Just that I have no other way of simulating this other than using the betting lines as I'm not simulating range. Like if someone wins in the first round, they scored 90 to 100 points. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not running like fight punch by punch type of thing or anything. Just like how often does this score? How often does a KO happen? Looking at the betting line and just saying this happens 18% of the time. This happens X% of the time. It equals 100, and just run it for all these at the same time for these lineups, and just going ding, 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 ding. And it just comes out that the more money, that's the higher salary fighters, assuming that it's efficient pricing, because obviously we get slates sometimes. A replacement fighter, next thing you know, the $7,300 fighter is minus 300. It's like those are the slates where a 48-3 lineup has about as much win probability as the 50K lineup, because obviously you have one extremely mispriced fighter.
Yeah.
So like that's why I said on average. So like it makes too much sense intuitively to me that I'm still going to bang my head about it. I mean, I'm not going to proclaim that I'm right.
Yeah.
But I'm working. I'm actively now trying to disprove myself. Like I'm at that point. I'm at the point where
I think you're right.
there's nothing for me.
It sounds
I can't
right to
do
me.
anything more.
Yeah. Blender, before I think that you're sounding like you're going to wrap up the show, but first I just want to get your take on we seem to be moving toward flatter payout structures in MLB. Isn't this your dream? Haven't you been wanting flatter payout structures?
Now that I want to play different sports and different everything.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Is it flat today?
I actually haven't looked at it today yet. I saw 50K to first, so probably not.
Right. Well, I mean, they do it once in a while. I mean, I know they do it once in a while because the one MLB the win that I have for 2 years ago was on the day they made it flat. Now it looks like, let's see, 50K to first, 20, 15, 10, 7.
Yeah, 15 to third.
No, but still 1,000 to 10th. It's not. It's a little bit better, but I mean, I'd much rather.
I mean, we've been seeing 50K to first, 10K to second frequently. So
right.
It's at least flatter at the top.
Right. But I prefer it to be 30,000 a first, 20, 30, 20, 15, 10, 7,500, 6,000, 4. Like I want that 10. If 10th place could be $2,000.
Yeah.
Like
that'd be nice.
Like kind of like a 10 to 1. I want 10th place to be 10% of first place. Like that. If you could scale first to 10th that way, that would be my favorite. But
I'm pretty happy with this though. This looks pretty good to me in general. Much better than it has been recently.
But I mean, they experiment with stuff all the time. But I think they should have been doing this type of stuff a long time ago. Right.
Yeah.
Especially in MLB, I think that you want people to keep account balances. Like it just makes no. The data they showed me, I was having a conversation on Twitter about this with Jesse and someone else or whoever, I don't know, with Nelson, I think.
Yeah.
That I was told that the data shows that the larger the first, that people look at the first place and that drives participation.
I believe it.
Right. So they make 100K to first is better than 50K to first. And the difference between 40K to first and 50K to first, it matters. The higher it goes, the more participation you get. But that doesn't take into account, yes, you get more participation, but how does that affect you?
Retention.
Right, retention long term, like a year from now, 2 years from now. Because what ends up happening, you get one of two things. One, the bigger more top heavy the payout structure is, the more it benefits sharp players. Okay? I've never disagreed with that. because sharper players tend to build more for win equity versus min cash equity, and so many bad players play too chalky, play too like that. So it benefits. The problem is that you may die 14 times before realizing your EV. Like that's why,
Right.
like to a sharp player, EV wise, it's better.
Yep.
But as far as like being able to risk of ruin, it's you may never get there, right? You
Yep.
90% of the lobby goes broke. You could be the best player in the world, and 90% goes broke by the time they have enough profit to make up for that, right?
Yep.
So that's how it doesn't benefit sharp players if you're worried about risk of ruin. And then, so when a sharp player wins 100K to first, most likely it stays in the ecosystem, but it's all you're basically extracting a ton of money from bad players all at once, right? Yep. And you don't want that to happen. You want them to go broke as slowly as possible, right? And then if a recreational player with one lineup wins $100,000, do you think they're putting that back in the ecosystem?
Some might.
Some, but I think a lot withdraw $95,000 and go off and say, I got $5,000 to play with, type of thing. So that's coming out of the ecosystem also.
Yep.
It's perfectly fine if your acquisition exceeds your churn. So like 2015, 2016, 2017, they're spending $1 billion on commercials. They're generating all these new users. The new users come in, they go, I want to win $1 million. I'm going to play a Millie Maker, right? And then they I don't want to play this contest for 10K to first. I want to play $1 million to first. Oh, okay. Oh, I'm going to play NBA. Oh, they don't have $1 million to first in NBA. I'll play 100,000's good, but not 10,000, not 25,000, but 100 sounds good, right? And here I'll build my one lineup, my two lineups. When you're getting people in the door, putting in $100 deposit and playing two lineups for $20 or something like that, and they're coming in, and when that guy is like, well, I'm not going to deposit for another month, you're getting 3 more guys to replace him, right? Coming in the door, right? So it's like the new 3 people are like, I want to play 100,000 at first, right? All that type of thing. But what happens when the net is negative? When there's more people leaving, when the account balances are going down than you could take in, and being that they're focused so much more on sports betting now, that the new user acquisition for DFS is much lower. Now they will promote the fact that their daily active users have grown year over year, which is true, right? Mm-hmm. From a daily perspective, but any metric could make it sound one way or the other. Sounds good.
Sure.
We had 300,000 daily active users. Now this year we have 370,000 daily. But what counts for a daily active user? Someone signing on and entering a contest.
Yep.
Right. Now you count for one. I count for one, and Joe Schmo down the street for $3 counts for one. Right. Mm-hmm. Now there are a lot more Joe Schmoes than us. Yep. But they're not all playing regularly. So Joe Schmo 1 plays on Tuesday, and then Joe Schmo 2 plays on Wednesday. Joe Schmo 1 may not play again for 3 weeks, right? But there's enough Joe Schmoes that they come in. But if you're not getting new people in, those Joe Schmoes are going broke quicker. Yep. And instead of playing once every 2 weeks, they're playing once every 3 weeks, once every 4 weeks. So you have a lot more raw users. So like on a daily level, there are more individual people playing, but they're playing less often for less money, right? Yep. And so how do you survive an ecosystem with a 15% rake when there's less new user acquisition and people are going broke quicker, playing less often for less? Like you can't have 100,000 for you can't jet all this money. You have to make sure that people get something back more often in order for them to play longer. And yes, their data from 2017 shows, well, 100K to first fills our contests better. And I asked them, I said, well, what happens 5 years from now? Like, and they assured me that they're a data-driven, it's the company line. We are a data-driven company, and we take trust me, we have the smartest people, whatever. And me, I'm like, I don't fucking trust anything you find. I'm pointing out flaws, right? Like, dude, Like, what happened? Like, I asked, I mean, they never gave me an answer of, like, if you take away user acquisition completely, what does it look like 5 years from now? Because I'm using that extreme teaching mechanism of, like,
Hmm.
yes, it looks like this when you're getting 3 more people in for every one you lose. But what happens if there was no more people, right? The birth rate went to 0, right? And we started today, and there no more new users. How long would these contests last? How long would you last? 100K to first, top heavy, garbage pay, that type of stuff,
Right.
compared to flatter up top, compared to maybe the min cash line is 2x and you pay out the top 18% versus the top 26%.
Hmm.
And maybe you pay up the top 30% and min cash is 1.25x.
Yeah.
Like, what is like taking away new user acquisition? What does that look like? And I never got a, because that I kept on. My pushback was it's going to look like this when there's more people coming. Yeah, sure. What pizzas are selling? You open up a pizzeria, like, well, the pepperoni pizzeria. The more pepperonis we put on, the more people are gonna, like, yeah, because you're getting more people in the door, and so there's more, like, oh, I want as much pepperoni as possible, and next thing you know, half your customers are vegans and they're not gonna eat. I mean, like, you don't know what. I don't think there's a very good example, but the pepperonis don't
They
work.
die. You give them the big stakes, people come in, but then they die of heart attacks. So then I don't know.
Right.
That's where I thought
Something.
you were going with that, maybe.
Well, I don't know. It's just something like that. But that's my take on the matter. I don't think DFS is going away or anything, but the this is what they should. We wouldn't. I think the DFS economy, the ecosystem, which I still think is perfectly fine now. It's people are, the sky is falling. It's not. Uh, the DFS ecosystem would be a much better spot if they had flatter payout structures from the beginning. You could use
Yep.
the Millie Maker for NFL, great marketing tool. Great.
Yeah.
You want to run a Millie Maker for PGA for the majors, I get it. You want to run it once a year for the other sports as a special or something, I get it. They're marketing. But from a day-to-day basis, I think 50K versus 100, like, you shouldn't be paying more than 20% of the purse to first place, right?
Yeah.
Like, you should, like, if anything, 10% to first and 1% to 10th. And that should have been the standard. And then the top heavy ones are the specials. It shouldn't be the other way around. And I think had that been from the beginning, like, I think there'd be way more DFS. I think the lobby, we'd have more people playing DFS than more raw people playing than there
Yep.
were, rather than people that deposit $200, $300, and they're like, yeah, this I'm not playing this anymore, right? This is
Yep.
right, and they or people that play somewhat regularly. They work, they play, they lose a little, win a little, win a little, win a little, lose a little. And then finally they have a really good day and they come in 6th place for $700 when it's
Right.
50K to first. And they're
Yep.
like, dude, I beat 31,000 people and I got like 70x on my money. I'm just going to
Yep.
fucking make 8-game fucking parlays. Because
Yep.
now this is stupid.
Yep.
Right? But if they would have won $4,000,
Then you love it.
right? Yeah. And it was flatter
Yeah.
up, they'd be like, okay, that seems pretty good. You wouldn't
That
be
makes sense.
emotionally
Yeah.
scarred already.
Yeah.
That's kind of the point. And I think
Yep.
it'll be much more sustainable for everyone long term that way. And maybe that's what maybe that is what they're shifting to. I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No.
It's been, I mean, even today, that is flatter than it's been. It seems like they might have had a little change in mentality. We'll see. I don't know. Yeah.
Dude,
I don't know for sure either.
Dude, Neil, this is the company that we all know. We all know whoever works at DraftKings on the weekends, they obviously have the janitorial staff in charge of their product. Because,
Interesting.
well, you have to notice that, like, any Monday NBA slate with injury news has never, the pricing, we know the guy's out on Sunday. And then Monday comes around and the backup point guard is still 3,000. MLB, how many times does a new series start at Coors, and the visiting team is still priced as if they were in Petco the day before, and it's
I
like
feel like
what are
that it's worse this year than it has been. I feel like in years past they would uber price them up at Coors, and this year it feels like they're not doing it as much.
right? That's why I said the janitorial staff is in charge. Like
Yeah,
so understand where my perspective is coming from, where it's like,
yeah,
well, they're doing this they're testing this out. Like, dude, they can't even get the goddamn pricing right on the simple stuff.
yeah.
You really think they're that's why when they're telling me, oh, we projected forward 5 years on the ecosystem, I don't buy any of this shit. You can't even get fucking soccer pricing right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I would be playing soccer and be like, what, like the team from the Champions League team from Bulgaria that no one knows, they just priced down at $4,500 a player, even though they're a minus 300 favorite, just because you have no data on the team, because they don't play in the Premier League. They don't play in any of the other leagues that you normally have. And the person that came up with the pricing that day just said, fuck it. Right? It's like, so don't tell me you're a data-driven company, and then we have teams that are mispriced. The guy is ruled out in NBA. The guy gets injured Saturday. Literally in a game Saturday. It's been known that he's going to be out for 3 games. And you get to Monday, the Monday they're on the slate, and his backup center that's going to play 38 minutes is 3,400. Like, don't tell me your data. Don't tell me that. Like, if you can't get that right, what the fuck else? How could you not get? I don't trust you to get anything else right.
I mean, that's beneficial to us, but yes, I agree.
Right. So like,
Not beneficial to them.
right. But that's like, to me, that's the proxy of.
Yeah.
Like, dude, you can't be that stupid, right?
Right.
But they are.
Fair.
Neil, High Stakes DFS podcast on
Check it out.
awesemo.com. And when I come on, I'm going to talk shit about Eric Mine.
All right, we'll reverse it. That's a good idea.
You
We'll
know what
roast Mine
I
for
was
an hour.
thinking during that episode? I was thinking that it's quite. You know how funny this is going to be? I think it's quite possible that when you have me on your podcast, you may speak more on that podcast than you do on this podcast, even though you'd be
For sure, I
interviewing me.
will. Yeah, I think for sure that's going to happen because I'm
Like,
going to be
your
asking all the
podcast is an
questions,
interview podcast.
leading the conversation.
The
Yeah.
guests are supposed to be talking the most, and it may
Yeah.
turn out that the podcast where I'm a guest, I talk less, even with
Yeah.
you on it.
I think for sure that is going to happen. You're still going to talk more than me when you're the guest, but yeah, I think it'll be more evenly split because I'll be asking the questions.
Right, exactly.
I think definitely likely.
I was just listening to the going that it's going to be insane that I'm the interview subject, and you're going to have more words to say in that podcast than in this podcast.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable.
Okay, at PlayerQDFS on Twitter is Neil, at BlenderHD. That's where I am on Twitter. And as always, the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com.